All right, stop me if you've heard this one before, but I don't have much to say tonight. This should be quick, right? All right, so video journal. It's my responsibility every day. Come here, drop off the thoughts that are in my brain, go about my business. Thoughts that happen to be in my brain today are generally better, I think, than normal. I feel like I've come to a point where I have a healthy relationship between the things that I'm trying to learn, the things that I'm trying to do, and the responsibilities of my life, and how all those things are changing my opinion of myself as a responsible citizen, or somebody who's a part of echelons of existence, um, communities that I belong to. I don't have any grand illusions of grandeur about coming to understand my individual role as a member of society, just because I am finally rising to the responsibility, the occasion of the responsibility of an active citizen, doesn't mean that I should get a pat on the back for that. And just like that, it doesn't have to necessarily dominate everything that I think about or do. It needs to find a way to fade into the background. It needs to find a way to just become a part of who I am as a person. Um, and that's what seems to be happening. That's sort of where we're going. That does make me feel a little bit concerned that I would get used to normal behaviors of just sort of living my own little life in a bubble and forgetting that society requires engagement, especially given the fact that I wouldn't say that my education or understanding is complete on how to engage, or necessarily the cost or benefit of engaging in different ways. I still have more, reading and understanding to do as it relates to just being a responsible, active citizen. And I get that, and I understand, and I respect that. I'm not, you don't get a pat on the back for doing your allotted part in a society. You don't, not it's not meant to be a system where as soon as you become aware of your responsibility, you get special placement. We all should, by default, be getting some sort of education on what it means to be a member of a society that's in part governed by all members of society. There should be some minimum standard of understanding and respect for those systems that, as citizens, we have access to and responsibility to participate in. And that's true of every single person. That they must have access, and that they have a responsibility to use that access. And you need to go about your life anyway, knowing that. And at no point do you become absolved of that responsibility, and at no point does that responsibility, fulfilling that responsibility, mean that you're deserving of some special treatment. So, it feels like one of those things that's optional. It feels like one of those things that's an elective. It's not optional. It's not an elective. We just have kind of gotten used to ignoring that it's there, and maybe that's the thought. Anyway, all this to say, just introduction. These things don't need to be. I don't need to be writing a video manifesto here or something. This is just part of being an adult. But I do intend to continue to document my thoughts as I'm having them. So today, thoughts have been more on maybe the practical side. I see myself as sort of a technologist. One of the things that I'm trying to crack, and not I'm trying to crack right now, is the concept of innovation and how that can apply to, oh gosh, I'm using the term innovation. God help me. There's no way for me to explain to you what I mean by that. It's an empty word. It is an empty word. Okay, where to start with this? Um, where to start with this? I guess you have to start with some entity. And I guess for purpose of example, I would have to start with a private entity. So that private entity is going to have to be a company, and that company is going to want to provide some value proposition. The company wants to provide a value proposition to a customer segment because they want to well, if it's a company, then they want profit. And I can't I can't use a well, I guess I have to give the public example instead of the private example. A nation. A nation wants to innovate. A nation wants to compete. A nation wants to deliver disruption in their competitive environment. They want their objectives met. They want to provide a value proposition. Um, Gosh, what an immensely complex problem statement. What does a company is more simple? We want profit. A nation is more complex. We want what the collective wants. We want, gosh, what do we want? We want prosperity for everyone involved in this joint venture, and we want equity in that prosperity, and we want we want our um, interests represented in whatever larger context we collectively are, operate within. So if this is in reference to a nation, there are other nations. There is a global, economy. There are global politics, and we would want to participate in that. And we want our interests represented, and we are advocating for our interests. So really, if you want to be innovative, if you want to be disruptive, if you want to practice creative destruction in an international global environment, then you're competing against other nations. So innovation in that sense is how do we get ours, right? I mean, at its base premise, it's how do we ensure our own prosperity and success. Now I've just been spouting, days of, well, success means everyone's success, right? Um, but that's very difficult. Like, what language do you use to describe that when you're talking about an international order? Within the context of a democracy, you can be a little bit more. There are existing channels and existing terminology to use to talk about the common good. But when you're talking about some democracies and some not democracies, when you're talking about an international marketplace of wildly different structures and their competing private interests, I don't really know what the framework is to discuss that. And so I have to default to the concept of competition, because that's the only terminology I have to define it. I need better education here. I'm an idiot. So from the perspective in which I was discussing it, you can either talk about innovation, creative destruction, disruption, the advancing of our fundamental capability through novel concepts and ideas and applications, as being a selfish advancement in a marketplace, or you can talk in a marketplace, whether it's an economic marketplace or a marketplace of ideologies and national borders. Innovation, I think, is a self-serving practice, even though innovation really does end up benefiting everyone at some point. The technologies that we have because somebody introduced them for the purpose of getting ahead of somebody else. But as they spread, the quality of life got improved for everyone that technology touched. So innovation is objectively good. but it also seems to be objectively selfish, because the competition for innovation is one of competing interests. So anyway, innovation is on my mind a lot, and that's why I was saying, when I introduced this, I was saying, gosh, I have no way of telling you what I mean by innovation. Hold on a second. Doing a video. So anyway, that is some basic introduction to the concept of innovation. So how do you implement into innovation? How do you nurture innovation? How do you practice innovation? You might be looking at innovation as an opportunity for selfish gain. You might be, economic gain, financial gain, representation of your place in the marketplace, whether it's an ideological place, a marketplace, an international marketplace, borders, money, whatever it is. You might see it as competition. You might see innovation as altruistic, an opportunity for a scientist, engineer, technologist, mathematician to advance the bleeding edge of human understanding and benefit generations to come through your inventions. But whatever the case, there is an incentive to bring it about, and it becomes more complex the more moving parts there are in the process of innovation. And I guess everything is a moving part, right? Innovation is, to some degree, I just mentioned, a part of everything. At any given time on the planet, there are conditions, and within those conditions, there exists the opportunity for new conditions to arise. And you can't necessarily separate any of those conditions from any other ones. Like the Industrial Revolution, how did we get there? What was it? A technology thing? Was it a science thing? Was it a math thing? Was it a political thing? Was it a national thing? Was it a result of economy? Was it as a result of statecraft? Was it a result of the particularities of human history that led to that event? Yes, it was. It was all those things. So when you discuss innovation, you really are talking about absolutely everything. But are you talking about it from the perspective of you as an individual trying to operate within this everything? Are you trying to talk about an enterprise and both the inside and the outside of that enterprise? So if you're talking about this as being an enterprise type thing, then you have to define the conditions that exist within the enterprise that can drive innovation of the enterprise, and you have to also look outward to see what is the context, the environment that the enterprise exists within, that it should be basing those things on. So how does it connect to the outside? If you're just an individual, if you're a sole proprietor, if you're an inventor in a garage, it's a little bit more simple because you don't have to go to the effort of defining all of the internal workings of yourself. You just operate in the environment that you're in. But if you're 100,000 strong, there's a lot of internal work that needs to be done to make sure that all of the internal working pieces are aligned and facing outward to respond to changes in the environment. And the environment might well also be within you. It might be outside, but it also might be within. So you have to have eyes in all directions. And that really is what it is. Innovation is a process of just watching very carefully, and exchanging information, and passing things back and forth and seeing things in different lenses over and over and over and over again, turning things over in your head, in your collective heads, until something takes form, something takes shape that has promise to change things fundamentally. And so from my perspective, it's sort of a user experience practice, and I probably will say that about just about anything that I think of, because user experience is the frame of reference through which I view the world. Whatever it is that you're going to do, if you're going to make something, implement something, change something, adjust something, write something, move something around, show something, whatever it is, it has an audience. It has an intended purpose, and you have to look at what you're doing from the perspective of where is it being received. And most often, the things that I would develop, a human receives them. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of how does this affect the human on the other end. So that's the user experience is specifically, I'm going to make something with the end result in mind, knowing that the end result is, because this is facing a human, going to happen in that human's head. going to be that human's experience. The user of my device, the user of my product, is going to have an experience as the result of using my product, and it's that user experience that I'm really designing. It's not so much the product, it's the user experience that I'm building. And the product is going to be anything that it needs to be in order for me to create that user experience that I'm desiring. So so I think of innovation as being a user experience practice, because it is totally outward facing. It's totally looking at the potential end result of whatever activity you might perform. It's wholly focused on the context in which your innovation takes place. None of this is done in a vacuum. You're looking at what is the impact, what is the value, not what did you make. I mean, that's art, right? Art is admiring the thing that was made for its own quality, not what happens as a result of that quality. The outcome is immaterial to art. Art is art. On the opposite side, innovation is the value that comes out of the innovation, and user experience is the value that comes out of the user experience. So I see them as being pretty similar. So what is innovation? So what is innovation? Innovation is understanding your context in its entirety and directly addressing the need that's being expressed by the context in its entirety, which is a challenge, because the larger your context, the more likely you are to focus on some small part and fail to see the forest for the trees. And that's especially true when you have a great many people working in a great many different fields or departments who communicate with one another through maybe not fully modern means. Like you might have an institution that has some archaic ways of communicating and sharing information, passing information from one place to another, and deciding when what needs to go where. And if those mechanisms aren't immediate, if those mechanisms aren't available to allow the exchange of information from one place to another, then it's going to be impossible to understand a context that's changing continually. You'll only ever see parts of it, and those parts will, when they coalesce in a particular area, each part of how the context is understood is going to have a different as-of date on it. So you've got a picture that's changing constantly, and you've got multiple eyes that are on that picture, and it takes different amount of time for the picture from each eye to reach the middle. So what you end up with is like when your screen's refresh rate is different from like the camera that's pointed at it, and you get like different parts of the picture in the same frame. That's what you're getting. You're getting a patchwork of what it looked like at different times, and none of it is congruent. What you really need is you need the ability to see everything. You need the ability to understand and interpret everything. You need the ability to do it all in real time and respond to what is actually real. I'm getting very abstract, but innovation is a very abstract topic, and it's one that I'm really drawn to, especially because, again, as a technologist, I think that there are technologies that are increasingly important in understanding what innovation is and how to make it happen. Right now, we're totally obsessed with artificial intelligence, machine learning, the ability for information to categorize itself for consumption, as opposed to us going manually through piles of old newspapers looking for something. We can snap our fingers and say, I'm looking for this, and somehow the appropriate newspaper articles come to us. That's amazing that we don't have to manually process all of that information looking for things. So we're trying to get better about processing information and demanding things that we're looking for. A search engine is really good at returning to you terms that you're looking for, but it might not be good at showing you trends that you're looking for. Now, if you type into Google, like there are some things that you can type into the search bar, and it'll give you some, graphical representation of what it is that you're looking for. It does translation. It does, serves basic calculator functions, but it'll also give you, like stock tickers, and it'll give you COVID information. You can see if you search something COVID, it'll give you a metric. It'll give you some data that's plotted, and that's intense, right? That's more than just giving you articles on COVID. That's actually giving you visual information to answer a specific question. It's intelligence. So two things happening at once. This intelligence, where it's processing stuff for you and making it easier for you to come by increasingly larger concepts that are increasingly more up to date and require less hands to produce. And it also, requires this concept of big data. So you have the intelligence of being able to sort things, and you have increasingly large stores of information that are being produced at record volumes, and cataloged and categorized and prepped for intelligent consumption because that's becoming more of an automatic process. The volume of information that is processed for query is increasing rapidly every day. So big data and intelligent systems, these two things together are the way that we will be able to innovate. We will not be able to innovate without utilizing those two tools moving forward. And that's interesting. That should challenge your concept of what it means to compete in a economic marketplace. It should challenge your conception of what it means to compete in an international or global marketplace of economies or ideologies. So though it'll be fun to try to work on some of these things. I can't say that's my skill set right now, but I'm increasingly more interested in that. I came from game development, thinking that I was going to participate in shaping messages that become thematic in popular culture and therefore part of zeitgeist, hegemony, whatever you want to call it, and drive thinking in that manner, like a Hideo Kojima. But that got me involved in eventually augmented and virtual reality, and augmented reality got me interested in object recognition. Object recognition got me interested in artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence got me interested in big data. And now I'm looking at things like, I shared a link earlier about there's an article I saw advertising the U.S. Digital Service, and gosh, that is exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly the thing that I believe in here. The U.S. Digital Service is this kind of technology, this enterprise systems, data services that utilize intelligence systems and big data for a user experience type purpose. And the user that they have in mind is the citizen of the United States, which is outstanding. It is a public works generator. It is itself a public work in a way, but it's a public works generator. It makes public works that are driven by big data and intelligent systems, and that is outstanding to me. That blows my mind. I really, really, really am into that, especially because it gives me hope for us being able to maintain the principles of democracy in this new era. Because if it really does require things like artificial intelligence, intelligent systems, and big data to lead, to play in the global world stage, marketplace of ideas, global economy, then those things are not currently in the hands of every person. We must count on our centralized state apparatus to do those things for us. And when it does those things for us, we must trust that they're being done in our interests. And to be honest, if you don't have a user experience approach to developing these things, then they will not be done in the interests of the people, because you can just design whatever you feel like is appropriate, and it'll serve the needs of whoever made it. Something like the U.S. Digital Service actually seems like it has promised to pull in elements of our self-governing constituency and say, this is what we want. Now, it's not individual people who are going in and requesting things. It's people that we have chosen to represent us who are deciding what sorts of public-facing services we need. But it still seems to be being developed from a perspective of democratic principles. It didn't have to be that way. I think they could have done this more quietly. I'm really happy to see it be as public-facing as it is. Well, of course we could do better. Of course we could do better. I'm sure that they could find ways to connect us more immediately to the experience of the individual citizen within the democracy. But I think we're kind of limited by the state of technology there. First, you have to develop the means to interact, and then you can interact and shape further services. But we don't even have the service in place yet of how the individuals interact and express their quality assurance feedback, their actual user experience from the services that were created. There's a lot of promise there. There's a lot of promise. This is necessarily the way that we must interact with our state apparatus as individual constituents, self-governing constituents. We could fundamentally change the face of democracy with this. As of right now, we vote, we participate in public discourse, and we I don't know that we so much, I mean, I don't know how much direct action is a component of a democracy. That's a good question. That's a good question. We protest, certainly. Free speech, freedom to assemble. But I don't know that the actual formal system goes beyond that. That's a good question. That's a good question. That's a question that I'm hesitant to define in concise terms, because it's a question about what is the nature of a democracy, and I don't want to think about that right now. But anyway, this could be a revolution in how we engage with our self-representing government, because now all of a sudden we have the potential ability to interact in real time with the institutions that govern us in immediate and very small, minute, detailed ways that we didn't before. It could be like, legislation could become, in the future, through these services, what day trading is on the stock market now. We could get that specific and timely with how things move back and forth if citizens are allowed to interact with that level of service, that level of data, that level of input. It could get weird. It could get really weird, but good. It's good. I wonder what that would look like. You know what it reminds me of? Twitch plays Pokemon. That's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of Twitch Plays Pokemon. That could be the way that we do this in the future. It's a very exciting premise. And again, all of this is to say innovation is out there, and it's gonna be dependent on these kinds of distributed and intelligent and pervasive, ubiquitous technologies. And hopefully the individual will have a seat at the table moving forward. And it seems like there are some wonderful, I'm very thankful, services in place to try to go in this direction. But by and large, you're talking about individual private interests that are either states looking to act in their own interest in a global sense, or companies looking to act in their own interest in an economic sense. But when innovation comes, if it's anything like the past, everybody will. I can't even finish that sentence. I wanted to say everybody will benefit, but then I think about the wages and profits and how those are diverging. The hope is that individuals will share in the improvements that we make, but it's no guarantee. It's no guarantee. It still comes back to, do we have the ability to participate as citizens in shaping our own fate? So things like the United States Digital Service are, I think, critical in ensuring that we're able to, as individuals, partake in some of the wonderful outcomes of the next generation of innovations driven by big data and intelligent systems. Because it's like the cliche, the robots are going to take our jobs article, right? Like, good. We all want our food to be made more efficiently and less individual human effort to go into that. Why wouldn't we like that? Well, because a few people own those robots, and everybody else, all I had left was the job. And when the job's gone, they can't even afford the product anymore, let alone the robot. So, yeah, man, I really like these. I didn't realize how pressing this was. I didn't realize how scary this was. I didn't realize what when I started talking about it, what a cliffhanger it is. We need to distribute the ability to work with big data and intelligent systems. The individual citizen needs to be able to operate in that sphere. And as of right now, we do and we can. Everybody has, you're on YouTube right now. I'm on YouTube right now. We have access to amazing, immense data through YouTube. We can find things we need to know through Google. We can use Google News and yada, yada, yada. All these services of, like being able to access and sort and find and categorize and deposit information and data. We have them. We have access to these things. But we have access as defined by the companies who have put them into place to serve private interests. So I guess we're all benefiting, but some of us are benefiting differently from others. Some of us are benefiting more than others. Is this a sustainable state? Will we continue to have these outstanding platforms moving forward? Is big data and our intelligent systems necessarily democratized because of the nature of what they are? I don't think so. I think they're all going to be necessarily private unless they're expressly public. So how do we as individuals compete? We've got a central state, we've got an apparatus, we've got a democracy, we can participate in it, we can decide what it is, and we have to decide that that we want access to the power of this moving forward. So hopefully apparatuses like the U.S. Digital Service will, I keep pointing over there because I have it open on my other monitor. Hopefully, hopefully we'll take full use of those. But I don't think that most folks think about it as being something that's important. Powers that be. What an interesting situation. Okay, I'm going to cut it off there for not having anything to say. Again, wow. All right. Have a good night, everybody, and please enjoy your life. Okay, bye.